really big trouble. In fact, so does Persia. They both get into really big trouble. In fact, all of Western civilization gets into really big trouble. And the reason is because of Indonesian fishermen. You know how they can go rogue. They're so dangerous. The Indonesians had discovered there were a bunch of islands through the middle of the Indian Ocean, and you could hop from island to island. So even though they didn't have truly ocean-worthy vessels, they had vessels that were ocean-worthy enough, you could get between the islands. And that made it so that you could start in Indonesia and head towards Africa, crossing the Indian Ocean, and you can island hop your whole way across. And before they knew it, they were on this really big island to the east of Africa called Madagascar. And when they got there, there were no humans living on Madagascar. They were just lemurs, our ancestors, but no humans. And they went, geez, let's set up a colony. And they did. And they began growing rice on the colony. And as they grew this rice, they began trading the rice with Africa. And before long, Africa itself began to grow the rice. And as they traded with other people, the rice began to spread across Africa until it got to places like Egypt. And before you knew it, rice was growing in Mesopotamia. And before you knew it, rice was growing even in southern parts of Europe. The reason why this is a problem is because to grow rice, you flood a field. And when you flood a field, you create a place for mosquitoes to grow. Malaria-bearing mosquitoes. And malaria ends up tearing up the entire region from Spain to Iran. Populations, the life expectancies absolutely plunge. If they were 40, 45, they dropped to 20, 25. And as a result, Rome's population goes into dramatic decline, and so does Iran's. And they're just barely scraping by. And then, as if that's not enough, there's an outbreak of the bubonic plague. It's frequently called Justinian's plague in the middle of the 6th century, and it tears Rome and Persia to pieces. The bubonic plague does this really weird thing where it looks like it's on an 800-year cycle, where it'll be dormant for 799 years. It'll wake up, tear through the human population for a year, maybe two, max, and then go dormant again. When I say tear through the human population, the last bubonic plague outbreak, which was 1348, killed 40% of Europeans in a one-year span of time. It killed 60% of Middle Easterners and North Africans in that same year. So just put this in perspective, we're running about a 2% fatality rate with COVID, not a 50% fatality rate. And then the bubonic plague goes back to sleep. For those of you doing the math real quick, it's 6.5 centuries. We got a century and a half left. And then it'll kick into high gear. I'm assuming this pattern isn't going to go away. I don't know why it would all of a sudden. It's happened so many times now. I think we're on 4 or 5. So that's comforting to know. So by the time we get to the 6th century AD, the populations of both the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire are dramatically reduced. There are just simply fewer people living, which means less food, smaller armies, and a terrible economy. The Romans are barely making it. So some of you might be a little confused because you've been taught that Rome fell in 476.